So, are you DTFF?
Once again, here's Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your host, Jake Trowbridge and Dustin Lunt.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday. For those of you that were at the expo like us, happy post-expo. Hopefully you didn't have to go into work today and you could relax and have a little recovery because that was a fun weekend. But oh man, and I am not used to staying up late and getting into those types of shenanigans like we did this weekend. How are you feeling after the expo, Jake?
At one side, exhausted, and the other side, exhilarated, because nothing both depletes and recharges my battery simultaneously, quite like the expo. It was awesome getting to see so many people out there. Met some new folks that I hadn't gotten the chance to see previously, which is always very cool, and a solid cadre of just studs that we get to see every single year as well. Studs and studouts out there. So I love it. Scampers, by the way, in the chat. Speaking of studs, good evening to you as well. But yeah, what was your takeaway from the expo this year? How's it compared to previous expos for you?
I thought it was great. Every year it gets a little bit better just because you know more and more people. So it's just like more hugs, more hey, how's it going? More catching up. Like it's just every year it gets better and better just because you're meeting more and more people, and that's what it's all about. Just connecting people, whether you're content creators or just fans of content creators, which I'm fans of plenty content creators. I don't really consider myself one, even though this is what we do. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun meeting everyone and just having a great weekend.
And another in the chat, yes, who we got to chat with at the expo as well. Welcome in, Chubbsburger. Appreciate you being in the chat for this as well. And I believe in the mock draft for tonight, which I don't want to bury the lead, but what are we doing here tonight?
Yeah, this is the final mock draft that we will be doing as a podcast here before the season starts. Figuring we've got about 2 weeks or so until the regular season starts here. So we've got some information from training camp. We've seen some preseason games. Let's do one final redraft mock draft here before the season starts as just a primer for everyone out there just to see how we've reacted. I think we did a mock draft about a month ago. And now that we have new information, we can see how maybe our opinions have changed on some of these players, especially maybe some of these later round guys that are having good camps that are more dart throws than the sure thing that we get earlier in the draft. And maybe, like I said, see how these opinions have changed on some of these players. And just talk about that. So it should be a lot of fun. And I think we should just get right into it. I'm going to assume that post expo you're not drinking anything this evening, Jake.
I am, but it's called liquid
All
IV
right.
for the kids in the know. That's how you rehydrate after a real nice weekend.
Yes, I'm rehydrating too. I grabbed one of my wife's Trulies. I'm all beered out after this weekend. Had way too much beer. Got to take a break. So, but do have to stay on brand. So here we have it.
It's fair.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
But yeah, let's get right into the draft here. This is just gonna be a 12 team, just a standard PPR league here. One quarterback, two running backs, three wide receivers, tight end, couple flex, defense kicker if we get that far. We set it up for 15 rounds. We'll see if we make it that far before we hit an hour here in the draft. I think we only have a 30-second timer, so we should be able to hit that. I'm not too worried about it. Let me pull up the screen here in Sleeper. We will randomize the draft order, and then we will get going.
First of all, while you're
All
doing
right.
that, hello, Hoove in the chat. Was delightful seeing you out there as Well, one of Wisconsin's finest, if I may say so myself. Chubbs, by the way, in the chat, Brandon's sucking down an MSY Amber from Second Line Brewing in New Orleans. I've never had that.
Oh,
I think
nice.
that's just going to have to be added to my list to seek out here. I love a good Amber on a normal day. Richard in the chat, by the way, very lucky to be on the receiving end of some Richard Sickles this weekend. Been chugging Gatorade for the past 2 days, still struggling. Look, we get it. We're with you.
We sure do. I was off of work today and I took a nap, which I never do in the middle of the afternoon. I was pretty much a worthless pile here, as I am recovering like everybody else from the expo. So, yeah, we're all feeling it. But hey, it's a great time. If you didn't go, definitely get in some of the group chats that are going on for the expo. I think they kind of go on all year round now, and get yourself involved and get excited and come on out next year. But anyway, I got the draft, restarted the order here, and let's get going. So we got Scampers here with the first pick of the draft. I've got the 9th and you've got the 11th. So we will be essentially back to back here as we're
Yeah,
going
it's going to be Snipe City.
fun.
Going to be Snipe City 1000% here. And look, the
Yeah.
first 3 picks, it's exactly as I expected them to be. After the first 3 picks, I really never know what's going to happen in a draft. But CMC, Tyreek Hill, and CeeDee Lamb is the first 3. It makes sense. It feels right. Does that feel like the appropriate start to you?
It does. It does. I mean, we've talked about CeeDee Lamb all this offseason and how we think, he's really the main guy in town. So I would probably take him over Tyreek personally, but I mean Tyreek is for sure just easy pick there at number 2 as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. Now, CeeDee Lamb's still holding out, maybe, potentially, for a contract deal. I don't even think about that until we get, like, right up to the season, and then I'll make some adjustments if I have to. But I just assume that it's going to be fine. Otherwise, I take the high road.
Mhm.
Then we've got Bijan here, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and A.J. Brown. Again, anything crazy out of there? I'm
Mhm.
going to say probably no, right?
No surprises. Maybe Justin Jefferson, I might have a pick or 2 a little bit lower in my rankings just with Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy there, but that's really picking nits and splitting hairs at that point.
Yeah. And I mean, in the first round, to some extent, I guess you do have to really pick nits. But yes, I agree with you. Justin Jefferson, a little bit further down. For me, I have to make this really hard decision. I hate the 11 spot. I hope I don't have to draft out of here in reality. Because it's not my favorite. There's just some guys I like. There's some guys I don't.
Mhm.
And most of the don't reside in this particular area for me. And I also don't like what it forces me to do oftentimes in this draft, which we'll talk about the structure thing a little bit. But like, I
Mhm.
end up having to either draft a guy that I don't love, which is what I just did, or draft a position that I'd rather not. So if I am at the 11th spot and Puka went right before me, I could have went with Marvin Harrison Jr. It feels too early. As much as I love him, that's too early for me to draft Marv. So I would like to wait, but instead I take Jahmyr Gibbs. So I lock up a running back. Then Marv goes. Then Saquon goes. And then I'm like, do I really want to start a draft with 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds? It's the antithesis of my strategy most times. And so then I look at who's available at wide receiver. And, it's Garrett Wilson and one other guy that I won't give away, just on the very off chance that he makes it back. He won't, but, kind of forces me into a rough spot. I don't love it.
Yeah,
How do you feel?
in this type in this type of format here where you have to start 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers, I usually like to start within the first couple rounds, wide receiver, running back for sure. Trying to get that bell cow or that anchor running back and then pick someone up a little bit later. I would have liked to have been a little bit more in the middle of the draft than towards the end here, honestly. I really want to have HN on my team this year, and he went with the seventh pick in the second round. But taking him over guys like Brees Hall and Gibbs, I just can't get myself to do in the first. So
Yeah.
I'll take a consolation prize of Brees Hall here, and then I went with Devontae Adams in the second round, just locking up a stud wide receiver here, and then hopefully, my strategy here will be kind of hopefully filling out the wide receivers and then drafting running back later. If one of these tight ends falls, one of these stud tight ends, we'll probably grab one of those. But again, it kind of just depends on how things fall here, especially with no premium for the tight end.
Yeah, I'll be honest, my desire to draft Devontae Adams comes and goes depending on the day. Drafting him in the second round, it's just depends on
Mhm.
my mood for that day because I can talk myself into it, and then I can easily talk myself out of it
100%.
because coaching staff change, a focus maybe on 2 tight end sets and, yada, yada, yada. And he's getting another year older and all that. And that was the decision when I was there, coming at the second spot in the second round. There was Garrett Wilson, who I ultimately took. And then it was Adams. Drake London was the other guy that it was really a coin toss for me. Honestly, I love
And
Drake
he was a
London.
coin toss for me too, Jake. I'm not going to lie. It was between him and Adams for
Yeah,
me.
it's a weird cluster. It's a weird tier of wide receiver. And then even after that, it really kind of gets a
Hmm.
little bit weird. Like Chris Olave, Brandon Ayuk with the trade stuff, Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, Michael Pittman. These are guys that went right after. I can see value in all of them, but none of them stand out as like, I got to get them on my team. And so there's this big beefy tier of wide receiver essentially. And now Debo is going to be the most interesting one. He went at the 304. Chubbs grabbed him. If the thing with Ayuk officially gets done, and he is traded off that team, Debo Samuel would be jumping up in that second round, I would assume, in terms of a must draft wide receiver. Is that fair?
Well, absolutely, absolutely, and I think the ADP just reflects the uncertainty there, that they
Mhm.
are so close together. So I mean, I would go either way, but yeah, I think you're definitely right there with that Debo call. Um, so in the third, we had Waddle, Pittman, Pacheco, Debo, Laporta, first tight end, Malik Neighbors, Travis Kelsey, Mike Evans. I took Rashad White. DJ Moore, you took your tight end at Trey McBride. Do you want to talk about that a little bit here going at the end of the third, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, because I come back now to where I'm available, and I knew that the other guys that I was interested were going to be there. So like this fella that I just took, I took a little bit of a leap of faith that Cooper Kupp would make it back around to me. I was thinking about going with wide receiver. Hell, there was a part of me that said maybe I'm finally the guy to grab the first quarterback out of the draft. It's not my MO, but there was a part of me because nobody had gone yet at that point. Ultimately, it's a tier gap thing in terms of the tight ends, though. That is how I draft. I like to have a tier of guys to look at. So I go, well, he was the last one in that tight end tier for me, was Trey McBride. And there was a cluster of wide receivers that I was comfortable with after that. So I thought the odds were better that one of them would come back than he would come back. So that was my decision point. And now you copycat. You go ahead and
Yep.
jump right into the mix with a tight end. Why don't you tell me a little bit about him?
Really, I'm using this mock draft as really how would my draft look if I do take a tight end early? Because typically I don't. I usually miss out, or I try to play the chicken game on like, oh, maybe Andrews will come back to me in the fifth, or maybe
Yeah.
one of these guys will make it and drop a little bit, and I can get one of these top 5 or 6 tight ends. And I always seem to miss out. So I'm going to try this draft saying, okay, I'm going to take my tight end position early. A guy that I have ranked very highly this year in Andrews, who's I think is going to have a great bounce back year this year. And we'll see how the draft happens. Now, I only have one wide receiver. Is that going to come back and bite me here as we come back to the end of the fifth round? We'll see. So I just want to kind of play this out and use this as an opportunity just to see how this draft plays out here with all these other sharpshooters we've got in our draft.
That's right. And I think that's the way to do it. And, the 2 auto draft teams that are here, by the way, that was the team that took the first quarterback off the board. So Josh Allen goes at the 401. Honestly, in a lot of drafts, I could see him going as high as the back end of the second round. So I think that is actually pretty deep, all things considered. And then that kicked off. There was 3 quarterbacks drafted in round 4. Jalen Hurts and then Patrick Mahomes followed that up a little bit later. So again, that was a real consideration for me. I agree with you that this is the time to figure out, just in terms of team structure. If I fuck around and I do something that I normally don't, am I going to love this? I hope that we both say yes at the end of this draft. And, you tend to have a little bit better, I'm not even going to say luck, a little bit better decision making when it comes to late end tight round. No, Jesus Christ, late round tight ends. I can't even say the words, let alone draft them correctly. But yeah, it'll be a struggle here. Do you feel already, as we've got some more picks going off the board? So after you took Andrews, we've had a decent chunk of running backs. Kenneth Walker went, James Cook, Josh Jacobs, Kamara, Mixon, James Conner just went. Do you feel regret at all? I mean, you have 2 running backs, you don't have to worry about that, but that must make you feel a little bit better about your wide receiver situation.
It does. It does. And part of the reason why I took Andrews too is that there was this cluster of wide receivers here that I was just like, they're basically all in the same tier for me. So it's one of those where I'm just like, I'm fine with any of them. If we get here to my pick, which is coming up soon, any one of these wide receivers that are still on my personal board, uh, I'll be perfectly happy drafting one here. And I think, yeah, I'm gonna go with T here. There's another guy I want, and hopefully he comes back around to me here on the short swing of the turn. But T Higgins, my number 2, I'm very happy with that. He's definitely a guy that, if Chase goes down for some reason, God forbid, he's going to step into a much, much bigger role than he already has, and could be another number 1 on my team at that point. So, Jake, I know you've got a pick here on the clock, but once we're done with this, I want to talk about the pick right after me of Jaden Reed. But we had a couple more quarterbacks go there in the 5th round with Lamar Jackson and Anthony Richardson, another tight end, and Kyle Pitts. So a lot of these onesies positions are really starting to fill out. I think it makes for interesting draft strategies. Jake, how do you feel about that Jaden Reed pick in the 5th round? As we're both big Packer fans here.
I'm a huge Packer fan, and I'm a less huge fan of that pick. As we've talked about previously, with that crew, I have 2 guys that I'm preferring out of that. And a lot of it does have to do with their upside / ADP. So I prefer Christian Watson, which now that I say that, somebody's going to snipe me, and that's okay. Or Dontavian Wicks later on. Only because with Reed, it's not that I don't think he's a great football player. He obviously is. I'm concerned about his target share, assuming full health elsewhere. So he got so much because Christian Watson was injured for a giant chunk of the season. We didn't have the ideal 2 tight end sets that we wanted with Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft because of that. And so he saw a lot more of the middle of the field stuff. And now maybe with Aaron Jones gone, that, insulates a little bit of that. But that's why I'm concerned about taking him that high. But again, get your guys. You got to do it if you believe in them.
Absolutely. So we've had 2, 3, 5, 6, 7 tight ends off the board here through 6 rounds. Does that surprise you at all, or is that just speaking to this kind of philosophy this year? There's really like this group of tight ends that could end up as the tight end overall number 1, or at least in the top 3, and then after that, it's just a bunch of question marks that they're fine but don't really have a lot of upside. So does this feel right for you? I mean, for me, Jake, I'll just say this feels like tight ends are going a little bit earlier than we typically see. But what do you think?
I get it, because there's only one other tight end left that I would really feel comfortable with drafting. After that, it becomes this giant crapshoot. So the fact of just let me lock in that tight end position and not have to worry about it, I get the appeal of that. Again, that's why I was interested in Trey McBride at the end of the 3rd. Now, coming back around, as soon as I drafted in the 4th, I was like, oh, I could have waited at my tight end. And honestly, so the same person who drafted Jaden Reed has so far my favorite pick of the draft, who took George Kittle after that, coming back in the 6th. Again, with the Brandon Ayuk news, I just brain farted my way out of realizing how much George Kittle had jumped up into my rankings, enough that I think that's the better pick in terms of value there.
Yeah, and then the heartbreak of the draft so far here in the 6th, Chubb's Burger, he took my boy Deontay Johnson right out from under me. I was really hoping he was going to make it another round here, but yeah, just a dagger right to my heart, Jake.
I'll be honest, man. I was gonna take him instead of Rome Odunze at the 6th, but I was like, I won't be a dick.
Oh,
I won't be a dick. And you had the opportunity, and you played your hand to
I
I don't know,
did.
something.
I did. What can I say?
Jake Ferguson
Oh,
was the last tight end that I was very comfortable with. By the way, Scampers ended up grabbing him at the 701. That's the guy just in terms of pure volume, where it's like, again, should be a set it and forget it tight end. And then we saw Brock Bowers go, kind of just hammering this. Now, in terms of upside, I don't think that you can get much better than Brock Bowers, but it's not a safe and sure thing, I don't think, for this year.
yeah,
Um,
especially in that Las Vegas offense.
Right, because you're assuming that that team drafted him with purpose and intent. And I don't know
hmm
that we've heard much about that. And we hear questionable comments coming out of them where it's like, yeah, he might just have to grow into a different type of role than what we wanted him to have. So we'll see. Again, I shouldn't speak to that. I'm bad at making that analysis. What do I want? Let's do it. I'm not going to mess around. Could I have waited? Yes, I absolutely could have waited because Team 12 had one quarterback, but they're also an auto draft team, so I didn't want to fuck around. I'm getting my Kyler Murray and Trey McBride stack this year. That was kind of a back end
That's
reason that
nice.
I even took him that early. And then I'm going to go get in on this running back situation a little bit more with Jonathan Brooks, who I just love from a volume perspective. Couple of guys I didn't really talk about that I drafted. Cooper Kupp, I got in the 4th. Just coming more and more around on him as we get more sort of sure signs of health, as much as we can in the preseason, at least. And then Aaron Jones. I was interested in the back half of the 5th, second to last pick in the 5th. If for no other reason, I don't know that he's going to be great all year, but TJ Hawkinson looks like he's going to miss a ton of time. I think the most
hmm
recent quote was, well, we hope to have him back in the first half of the year. It's like, that's not optimistic. And I think for as long as he is gone, Aaron Jones will feast.
Oh, 100%. And Aaron Jones, always undervalued, always underrated. He's probably going to come out, stay healthy again, and do exactly what we saw with the Packers last year, which will break my heart into a million little pieces. So here, Jake, we've
Understandable.
had a few more quarterbacks going off the board, and I know you've taken one. In Kyler, we had Stroud, Jordan Love, Jane Daniels go off the board. So most teams here already have their first quarterback. Looks like there's 3 teams left here, myself included, that don't have one. Do you think there's going to be a run on second quarterbacks here, Jake? Considering this is just a 1 QB league, or
Coming
what?
from coming from a guy who hasn't one of those 3 teams that hasn't drafted a quarterback yet, that question certainly feels like, help me figure out how long I can play this game of chicken, and I'm not going to do that. Honestly, though, I will say, based on how early the tight ends went in this draft, I don't think that anything is a certainty here. And
hmm
people who do like to have those kind of back end stacks to sort of play off of that, I don't think it's a guarantee. I mean, we saw, by the way, Jordan Love get drafted to the team with Jaden Reed. So again, locking up that stack. This room, I think, is probably a room that's going to do some of that. But there's your auto draft team, by the way, taking Joe Burrow. So there is a second quarterback, and that was from an auto drafted team, which is definitely the concern
hmm
with that. So hopefully you weren't
Yep.
hankering for some Joey B.
He was on my short list of quarterbacks, but Jake, if you want to, how do you feel? I know you mentioned stacking. Is that something you really look to do here, as far as your weekly redraft or season long leagues, as opposed to, I know it's a big thing for best ball that happens, but is that something you typically try to do for redraft, or one of those if things kind of fall into place and it happens, that's what you'll do?
I'll be honest, I did it on this draft just so I could say that I got McBride and Kyler Murray. But in reality, when I'm out there, it's more of a tie-breaking decision than it is I have to do this. Yes, in best ball, it's much more prominent and necessary to stack your quarterback with your pass catchers. This is a nice bonus to do that in redraft, but I don't find it as necessary. Do you? Like, is that a big part of your decision making when drafting?
No, really, it's one of those things. If it just happens and the draft falls that way, then sure, I'll make it. I'll take it, but I don't necessarily go out of my way to do that. Only because in your redraft league, you're basically, for most leagues, you're just going head to head every single week. So you're just going against the one other owner, one other GM in your league, and not against everybody else. So that's why I don't consider stacking nearly as important in just your typical redraft league. But like I said, if it happens and I'm able to do it kind of naturally, then yeah, I would be all over that. So to use your example, Jake, kind of as a tiebreaker, if Joe Burrow would have fell and I was looking at a quarterback between Dak and Joe Burrow as kind of a tier break there, I probably would have went with Joe Burrow just because I had Higgins and would kind of get that stack there. But again, not necessarily something that I'm looking to do consistently.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the right approach here. And same, by the way, I think just in terms of taking guys from the same team in general. So we talked about stack, but then there's also the idea of like, if we get down to it, do I want a wide receiver and a tight end from the same team? Do I want a running back and a wide receiver from the same team? And again, that's not something where I go out of my way to say, I already have Deontay Johnson. I can't draft Jonathan Brooks now. He's got to be off my board.
Hmm.
But it is a tie-breaking decision because how often are you going to be able to start both of those guys and reach their upside, both of them at the same time in a given week? One of them is
Yep.
going to cap the other one a little bit. So it might just play in more to maybe I do have to bench one of these guys this week based on the matchup for that position. But it's not something that I outright avoid. I would ask you here, we're deep into the rounds enough now. We're not giving anything away to the drafters here in this room, but drafting two wide receivers from the same team, is that something that you are okay doing at least?
Yeah, if I know what we're expecting to be is like a high powered offense. Let's just say in the example, like you're able to get Tyreek and then Jalen Waddle comes back around and you wanted
Yeah.
to do that, I would have no problem doing that because we know that's going to be a high powered offense. If it's more of a questionable offense, take Carolina as the example. We're just using Deontay Johnson and then, Xavier Legette. Like, would I be comfortable taking both of them? Probably not, because I don't think that offense is going to be as high powered. I think they're only going to be able to support one high end wide receiver. Give me Deontay Johnson.
Yeah. And then when you get those two really elite wide receivers or supposedly elite wide receivers, now is it a must to draft the quarterback? Now does that influence your decision to stack?
It's still not a must because, like I said, you're doing it on a week. You're only going against one other GM in your league, so you just have to win
Mhm.
that week. Would it help? Sure. If it naturally happens, yes, I'll do it, but I'm still not necessarily going to go out of my way just to make that happen. I'm not going to blow ADP out of the water or disregard my tiers just because I want to get a stack. Like that's just to me is not a great way to try to win.
Yeah, I respect that. And you have to love the quarterback still. So that's a great example where
Hmm.
I wouldn't do that because I don't love the quarterback. And I could love both of those wide receivers without loving the quarterback because we see how that pans out every single year. At this point in the draft, look, we're pretty deep. We're into round 11. I mean, just looking at where you are now, are you having any regrets at this stage already? Are you adjusting your strategy at this stage based on what you've done here?
Not adjusting my strategy per se, but more at this point of the draft is when I'm going to start throwing ADP out the window. Not totally, but I'm going to start going getting my guys that I think are going to be impactful or have high upside. Say an injury happens to a guy ahead of them. This is where I'm just going to start to reach a little bit, only because I know there's guys that they probably won't make it around when it comes back to me, since I'm on the back half of this draft board. Like this pick here, I'm going to reach a little bit. One, because I don't think it'll make it past you, Jake. Either pick, and I want to make sure I get this guy because he is one of my guys I love this season.
Uh-oh. Ah, shit. All right. Yep. Well done. Yeah, no notes. Dontavian Wicks. I mean, in terms of this is get your guy territory. We've got a kicker and defense that we still have to fill out. We've only got 3 positional picks left outside of that. So, and you're absolutely right, by the way, that was not going to make it back. Now I'm going to also be the guy who, look at this stage, because the way that we're doing this draft, of course, we're getting some information out, injury stuff, trade stuff, holdout stuff that we still have to factor in. And it's not baked into ADP just yet. So
Mhm.
I think that you do have to really start your scroll and be like, yeah, man, I'm not fucking around here. I'm not going to risk any of this. So I'm not going to risk it with this guy either. And he was on my not. Oh no, he went. Son of a bitch. Never mind. I'm going to get a consolation prize here. I didn't even see that somebody drafted Jalen Wright right before you took Dontavian Wicks. Actually,
Yeah.
Jalen Wright has gone up my board.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. He was a guy I was looking for, and I was like, "Oh, man." That's okay, though. That's okay.
It is. It is. But I pivoted. So I took Ricky Pearsall again with the news about Brandon Ayuk. It seems, again, 99% sure that he will not be playing for San Fran, but there's always that 1% chance until we get the official word. So a guy like Ricky Pearsall
Mhm.
could end up being very valuable as a rookie. He's a first round pick for a reason. And then not realizing Wright was gone, I was like, oh, I'll grab him. But I love Antonio Gibson as one of my guys later on. So at this point, again, there's only one positional pick after him, and then it's going to be kicker and defense. So I felt pretty damn good about that. But your pair, I mean, Wicks, again, we talked about a little bit, and then you went ahead with Jahan Dotson backing that up.
Mhm.
Were you just feeling like, I need wide receiver depth?
There's that, but I do think I have hopes with Jaden Daniels this year. I was really hoping to get Terry McLaurin back in the 6th round. Went at the turn with the computer drafted team. That's who I really want out of that offense, but I'll take Dotson as a consolation prize. If Jaden Daniels really shows out and comes out as a rookie and does really well, I think Dotson could have value. Maybe not a week in and week out starter, but definitely someone that would be a good flex play, great in bye weeks. So yeah, I think he could have some good upside.
I like it. I like it. Now we're sitting here. You have your quarterback, obviously. You have your
Hmm.
tight end. So we're both in that same situation. It does make it nice to be like, still look at how much depth I can accumulate at these positions. Now, I don't know if we technically need to. I kept bringing up the kicker and defense. Unless your rules explicitly state it in your draft, I don't think that you have to take them in the draft. You can wait and see if any last minute information comes out about the guys on your bench and then drop whoever you need to pick up a kicker or defense right before week 1. So is that a
Hmm.
strategy? In our home league, we can't do that. I know we talk about it a lot because we only have 12 ad drops and you don't want to waste one right out of the gate. But if that
Yep.
weren't the case, do you think that's a legitimate strategy? Let's say you draft a week before the season actually kicks off. Is that something you would consider?
Yeah, if it wasn't mandatory and I was comfortable just grabbing whomever off the waiver wire and really just playing the waiver wire game all season long, absolutely. I would have no problem doing that because then you have guys you're taking shots on that, God forbid, injury happens or they get a sudden move up the depth chart for some reason because they really show out the preseason. It gives you just a little bit more flexibility. And then, like I said, just stream the defense and kicker. Hopefully, you can end up picking one off the waiver wire that ends up being one of those surprise defenses every season that seem to come out of nowhere. And then you'll be set. But otherwise, just playing the matchups every week, I have no problems doing that.
I love that. Two things. Greg Dortch went, son of a bitch. I really thought, oh, last pick, lock it in. Greg Dortch, man, no problem whatsoever. Add that to my Arizona stack a little bit here with Calvary McBride. But no, Albert went in and got the human Dortch. My goodness. Also, I did want to point out this from Steven in the chat. It says Dobbs is the guy in Green Bay. Of course, we've talked about a fair number of Green Bay guys. Luke Musgrave also just went at this stage as a second tight end, backing up Brock Bowers, which I thought was actually very nice. If you are going to go with upside Brock Bowers, you're going to at least have to get another guy behind. But yeah, I think that just speaks to, like Steven's point, I think everybody has a different favorite Packer kind of this year.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I grabbed myself another Packer here in Marshawn Lloyd, hoping maybe he can get control of this backfield. I know he had a little bit of a hamstring injury in that preseason game, but doesn't concern me long term. We know what AJ Dillon is in this offense, and it's not probably going to be the number 2 guy. So give me a chance on Marshawn Lloyd here, coming out and being the number 2 guy that will be the primary relief for
Josh
Jacobs. I got there.
You sure did, damn it. And I'm not worried about AJ Dillon in any capacity there. Emmanuel Wilson, I think, will probably be the third running back, probably used a lot in special teams and that. But yeah, I hope that hamstring injury is not anything to be concerned about. Steven, by the way, says, I'm definitely not throwing up when talking about the Green Bay wide receiver 1. That feels rude, but I'm not even positive. But yeah, Scamper says, oh no, Jake. I don't know if that's in relation to the Dortch pick. I'm just going to assume that it is. It hurts me. I took Kamani Vidal, by the way. I don't care what anybody says about Kamani Vidal. I'm riding this wave. It might not be week 1. It might not even be week 2, but I still believe in Kamani Vidal to eventually overtake that backfield. I drafted Jermaine Burton as well. Again, I was talking about earlier on with Jermaine Burton kind of being my favorite pick if I'm not going to get Jamar Chase. I'm not going to probably mess with T. Higgins myself personally, but I could obviously be wrong, and Jermaine Burton could do nothing in his rookie season. Oh, Scampers is talking about the Vidal wave, by the way. Well, sorry, Scamps. I'm doing it, man. I'm doing it. Maybe I sniped him. Maybe that's what it is. Is that what it is?
Maybe.
I don't know. Tell me if that's
maybe.
What it is.
I'll be. I thought about taking Vidal over Lloyd too. They're in that same tier where things break the right way. They're going to have a ton of upside, which I love. So like I said, coin flip for me. Maybe my homerism came into the pick a little bit more, hoping that Lloyd actually becomes a thing and I can root for him on my team this year.
Yeah.
Now, as we're coming into the end of the draft here, this last pick, Jake, do you have any strategy necessarily that you're going into?
At this point, no. I mean, I've abandoned the concept here as everybody else is doing their diligence to draft a kicker and defense. I guess we probably should be doing that, huh? But no, in terms of strategizing at this point, again, it's just fill in depth wherever you can, wherever you think there might be some lackingness, and find guys who, again, you're okay cutting. Don't pick a guy that at this stage, well, if we don't, I made the joke about Kamani Vidal, and it's really just me coping at this point. But honestly, it will be a situation, hey, I want to know by week 2, what is the real deal with this guy? And if it's not happening by week 2, I can feel comfortable cutting to pick him up. That's my only form of strategy at this point. All right. Who do I dare? Who do I freaking dare? I'm going to go crazy. I'm
Ooh,
going to draft Quentin Johnson just so that he feels confidence. I want to instill confidence in this guy. And also just
nice. Nice.
basically know that those 2 last picks that I made of Kamani Vidal and Quentin Johnson, those are my guys that I'm going to cut for a kicker and defense when it gets right ahead of week 1.
Yeah, I'd probably say the same for my last couple picks here as well. Maybe my last 3 picks even with Lloyd. Unless one of them, like I said, really pops off, then maybe I would do that. Pick right before me there, Justin Herbert went. I was actually gonna pick him just to make the point of, like, just to point out how far he has fallen. I mean, he was barely drafted here in 15 rounds. Is he someone you would have taken over like a Stafford, Cousins, Tua, Goff range? Like would he be higher up on your board than this, Jake? Just and I know we've talked about this offense being much more run heavy and everything, but uh I feel like that's just such great value. Do you agree or no?
I think it's appropriate value. Like, I personally don't think it's great value. Again, I'm off of Justin Herbert. Again, the Quentin Johnson pick was really more in jest than anything. The Justin Herbert thing is because with that foot injury, I've started reading from all of the trusted doctors on Twitter. There's a good chance of re-injury with that. And that's the one thing that I thought might save his value. So, but in terms of pairing with Anthony Richardson, I think that's fine. You already have Richardson. And what if there is a durability concern there, if he does get injured or something just doesn't shake right for him? All right. Lack of a
Mhm.
guy like Justin Herbert, I don't think he'll be bad. So I think I'm okay with that. But I'm curious here to really see. I don't think there is too many double quarterback right? Team 5, the auto drafted teams I know, Mahomes and
Mhm.
Burrow. Then we have Allen and Goff. But and yeah, Hurts and Cousins we've got
There's
as
Hurts and
well.
Cousins, got Stroud and Caleb Williams.
Daniels
So
and
there's a
Lawrence.
number of
Actually, it
teams
looks
that
like mostly. Yeah, mostly too.
So, I just wanna point out here as we're kinda looking through the teams, Scampers here waited until the last round and got Matt Stafford,
I
but
like it.
just grabbed up value with all those other wide receiver and running back positions. Do you like that strategy, especially going out of the one hole here, getting, CMC, Collins, Waddle? I mean, got a lot of high upside players. Do you like that strategy of grabbing a quarterback totally at the end and maybe playing that streaming game the rest of the season?
Yes, I really do. Because again, once it gets to this cutoff of there's a certain level of quarterback that great. If I get Lawrence, if I got to take Trevor Lawrence, in the 11th or 12th or whatever as my QB1, cool, I'm doing that because it's kind of this last of this tier. But if I get into that Goff to Cousins range, yeah, man, just see who else falls, which is the last guy standing there for me, and hope that not everybody takes 2 QBs. But there's some players even after Stafford. Again, I've talked about Russell Wilson being okay with him. I think there's a level of quarterback later on. Baker Mayfield didn't go drafted in this draft. You can definitely make that strategy work.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, Jake, I'm gonna read off your team, and then I want you to kinda give me your cliff notes of what you would have done differently, if anything, or if you just really love your team. But you got Gibbs, Garrett Wilson, Trey McBride, Cooper Kupp, Aaron Jones, Roma Dunze, Kyler Murray, Jonathan Brooks, Khalil Shakir, Raheed Shaheed, Ricky Pearsall, Antonio Gibson, Jermaine Burton, Kimani Vidal, and the one and only Quentin Johnston. Um, Thoughts on your draft, Jake?
It's okay right up until those last 2 rounds, and then I just feel like I want to vomit now. But no, honestly, I'm not that psyched about this particular team. I don't love drafting out of the 11 spot. It turns out. Again, early on, the first 2 picks, it's just like, I don't feel uber confident in anybody that I'm taking in that range. So I do think it turns out I would love the number 1 spot or the middle round spots. I think that's the sweet biscuits. I also don't think that picking McBride there necessarily paid off. Again, especially looking at where George Kittle and Kyle Pitts went, at least a couple rounds later, like that. Not really worth the Murray stack at that point. So it's fine. it's completely fine. It feels like this is a team that's really going to have to play the matchups well, though. Let me return the
Mhm.
favor for you, though, because I'll be honest. I think I might like your team more at this stage. So you got Brees Hall, Devontae Adams, Rashad White, Mark Andrews, T. Higgins, Rasheed Rice, DeAndre Hopkins, Austin Eckler, Dak Prescott, Chase Brown for the big upside play there. Dontavian Wicks, Jahan Dotson,
Mhm.
Marshawn Lloyd, Javon Baker, and Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy, by the way, big scare today, but then a big sigh of relief.
Mhm.
Looked like maybe it was like an ACL injury. Turns out it's just a sprain,
Yeah.
hopefully. So should
Yeah.
be
Uh,
seeing plenty of time. Yeah.
yeah, should be okay for the start of the season, which is really good. And that's really the only reason I took him with that pick,
Mhm.
because it's like I knew the injury wasn't that bad. And if it turns out it is more serious, he's a guy I can easily dump, last round pick, not
Yeah.
that big investment. But yeah, I'll say I don't mind my team. Going with Andrews in the fourth, I actually turned out pretty well, I thought. Getting Rashad White as my number two, I was really happy with. Uh, have two top 12 running backs. That makes me happy. My wide receivers, I'm not super stoked about. Even taking Adams there, it's like he should be
Mhm.
fine. Higgins, like when it came up, he's got upside if Chase goes down for some reason. Hopefully Higgins can stay healthy. We know he's playing for a contract, so I'm expecting him to step up his game this year to really earn that contract. Uh, got Rice. We've talked about him not possibly getting suspended this year, so maybe taking a little bit of value there that he could be the number one option outside of Kelsey on that team. Hopkins is injured. Him and really went back to back in our draft. I think that just speaks to the ambiguity of that offense. Then took some high upside players with Eckler, Chase Brown, Wicks, Dotson, kind of things all I talked about. Jake, is there any other team that really stands out here that you thought just killed the draft and did a great job?
I mean, there's honestly a couple of teams that I'm really smitten with, but I do want to point out Obi-Wan Kenobi's team, which was out of the 7th spot. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, again, I prefer him over Justin Jefferson, who went a pick right before. But the pair of him and Drake
Mhm.
London, I have Drake London ranked extremely high this year. And again, I just wanted to differentiate. I went with Garrett Wilson. I already hate it. I already hate that I went with him instead of Drake London, but then pair that with Travis Kelsey in the 3rd round as the second tight end off the board. I still love Kelsey. Josh Jacobs in round 4. Lamar Jackson, DeAndre Swift, who should lead that backfield. Xavier Worthy. Now, that was a round after Rasheed Rice. I still think Rasheed Rice will be the guy, but you never know. And we've got Javonte Williams, JSN, Trey Benson, Zach Charbonnet, Kendre Miller, Michael Wilson, Justin Tucker, and Roman Wilson. I like that start, especially. That first half start to
Mhm.
that draft feels very nice. I really like the wide receivers, especially. But there's a
And I'm
couple,
not gonna
again.
lie,
Yeah.
I just want to jump in. Getting JSN in the ninth,
Yeah.
that was a heck of a move there. I think that's probably one of the better picks of guys that kind of fell a little bit. I think he's in line for a great season. I wish I would have taken him instead of Eckler at that point.
Yeah.
Uh, but I kind of felt like I needed another running back before we got into the double digits. And yeah, I love that JSN pick. I think that might be one of the steals of the draft, personally for me.
I could get on board with that for sure. I think they're going to be more pass heavy than they were previously. But Funsack has a really interesting strategy here. I mean, really just went all in on wide receivers for the first 4 rounds. So we've got Hill, Ayuk, Pittman, and Tank Dell. I think that's a really interesting way to do it, even if, I don't agree with the specific wide receivers necessarily taken there. I think that
Hmm.
concept of just going, fuck it, man, I'm going hard into wide receivers, knowing the value of the running backs later, which is what I really love. Mixon, Mostert, and
Hmm.
Singletary. Not sexy picks. I get it. Not sexy picks. Even Alexander Madison with the very last pick. I'm not a big Zamir White guy. I'm not a big Alexander Madison guy, but as your very last pick, like I think that's a very effective strategy.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of upside there. Mixon, we've talked about, not sexy, but should have the majority of the workload. So getting a guy that is most likely going to be the bell cow on a team in the fifth round is just stealing. Mostert's got great upside, like you said. Singletary, we don't know what's going to happen in that backfield. He could end up being a really great value. So that's a really good call out, Jake.
Thank you. Thank you very kindly. One that I am just curious about. I want to get your thoughts on this particular pick because I want to believe, God damn it, I want to believe, but I can't get myself to draft him even at a value. Keenan Allen in the middle of the sixth round. It feels both like stealing and also like it would give me pause.
I've cooled on Keenan Allen a little bit this offseason, just with Roma Dunze coming in. The more I've kind of learned about him, uh, the more I'm a little bit higher on him than Keenan Allen. But the guy's going right after him. I mean, I would take Deontay Johnson. I would take Chris Godwin. Um, those two for sure. I would have taken over Keenan Allen. The guys going in the next round, you've got Xavier Worthy, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Hollywood Brown. Uh, I would probably take them over Keenan Allen at this point as well. I mean, we haven't seen any slowdown from him, but the further or the closer we get to the regular season here, I do have questions on how this offense is going to look, and just taking them that early is really just it scares me. It scares me, especially as someone that in most likely is going to be your number two wide receiver, unless you go extremely wide receiver heavy to start. I mean, in this draft, it was his third wide receiver, so I guess that's okay, but there's definitely other guys I would rather have in front of him.
Agreed. Not sure how much he's going to be out there in two wide receiver sets this year, unfortunately. So that's
Mhm.
why I had a preference for Odunze. I do want to point out the two worst teams by far in this mock were the auto draft teams. So that fills me with some sense of joy and comfort. Don't auto draft, kids. Don't be that person. You're going to end up with a bad team. That's what I say.
That's right. All right, Jake. Well, I think that will do it for this evening. Any final parting thoughts here before we sign off?
I will just say it's preseason action. We've already gotten a helping of that this past weekend. It was great. It was wonderful. Just don't overreact. React. Don't overreact to every little thing that happens in preseason or every little training camp blurb. So be ready, like be flexible and take it in, but don't lock yourself into one direction or the other right now just because you heard such and such from the coach after a particularly bad or good performance.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I will leave it there because I couldn't say it any better. Please, folks, remember to go out, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can join us live. You can join us in the chat. Uh, Seeing how it was a mock draft today. I mean, we still had some good chat talk, but typically we're monitoring the chat pretty closely, answering any questions you may have, whether it's draft questions, trade questions, start sit questions as the season goes on here. That's what we're here for. So join us live, YouTube every single week. If you can't do that, make sure you're checking us out wherever you can find your podcasts. Listen to us every week. You have questions, you can still reach us. Hit our DMs up on Twitter. You can find my co-host here, Jake, at Jake Trowbridge. You can find the podcast at Drinking Fantasy, and you can find me at FF Dusty Dog. Uh, so yeah, hit us up for any questions you may have. Like I said, start sits, trades, draft strategies, whatever you want. That's what we're here for. We're here to help you win, give you advice. We'll answer your DMs pretty quickly. So go out and do that. As always, folks, we'll see you next week and keep drinking and talking fantasy football.
Cheers, FFers.